Hello, everyone. Welcome to this video, this offering. I felt called to do it because I wanted to have something like this online, especially from me, because this is something that I've been contemplating and doing extremely sincere work on for a few years now, to a point where it's kind of infiltrated essentially my everyday living and my choices and the way that I live my life, and it's infiltrated all parts of my belief. It's obviously the general work of apartheid, and I think is the good work of it, actually, the magic of it, how it's the damage of it has infiltrated our blood and our DNA so deeply. And so the work to uncover it and heal from it is going to take just as much dedication, attention, cellular investment, So I have some points here. I did put it in the description of this video, but I'd like to reiterate that this is all an entirely subjective, personal view experience. This is based on, like I said, years of living my life fully focused on trying to uncover this and its surrounds. But it all started with this, really. What it actually started with was an amazing channeling that I've been raving on about for years since it happened by Queen Cup Tarot, Destiny, who offered a channeling a few years ago once on the Willie Lynch letter, which I hope is still available online. I have shared it often, and I will share it in the description of this video, in which she addresses the idea proposed by Willie Lynch in order to be psychologically powerful, essentially, the way I understand it, and control a collective of people for generations to come and kind of instill a damage onto them so that you are powerful for a very long time and not just like some temporary, brief, short period. It is apparently, after further research, I saw that apparently Willie Lynch as a person is potentially made up. However, all of the things referenced, especially if you are a person of color, if you're a black person, if you're a person who identifies with still needing to heal from, apartheid damage, then it's extremely relevant. The things that Willie Lynch, the person, suggests in that letter, and the ways that the damage is predicted to carry on in a bloodline, it's so accurate, and it really uncovers so much about not just your relationship with your parents and with other people of color. It also establishes a relationship within, it establishes an understanding, further understanding of what happens within different races, within family structures, business structures, and even within yourself. I highly recommend you do research on it, but most importantly, you watch Queen Cup's delivery. I really appreciate the way that she reads. She does it with a passion, and it's very interactive, live stream, chats, all of that. Gives you so much to think about and to work with. So yeah, watching that changed my life, and I've been very, very deeply invested in trying to uncover the psychology of that in my life for myself. It's basically been a hyperfixation. The first point I put here in my efforts is related to the title of this video, to heal from apartheid damage, family structure, my personal structure. The first thing I tried to do is to move slow. I typed sincere efforts into being present, daily meditation, prayer, somatic work. And this is something that I realized is especially important if you want to be, in my opinion, rich. If you want to experience abundance in the true sense, then you have to move slow. I noticed it in the behavior of people who very particularly do not have money worries. They don't think in survival and what happens in their lives. So I linked their naught of survival frequency. Yeah, they don't have survival frequency. And I noticed how that almost always links with how, like, the way that they live their lives. It's like, oh, of course you don't have the survival frequency because your life is set up such that you don't really need to survive. Like, They're always extremely lucky people. They never ever make choices from that place of, oh, I have to do this because I need money to da-da-da, or I need to. No, it's almost always just, this is what I really feel like doing. This is what is called to me. That's their language. And I've seen this across all kinds of people. So you can't even say, oh, that's a chakrahan statement. No, I've seen this in people who don't even identify as chakrahans, but they live like a chakrahan lifestyle. But more particularly, they do not work with survival. They don't think that way. They just don't. It's just something that just isn't ingrained in them. It just isn't. And I saw this also more particularly in generations that have a continued abundance, where like they have multiple properties and they could evolve, and then the family could split and live on those multiple properties. And it was just very naturally that it happened that way. You know, it wasn't, they never speak of a sign of struggle through their journey. It was more just like, this is the work that happened in order for us to all get there. And it happened very naturally. And there was no, it was as if their whole life and everything they do is just so in harmony with, they're in harmony. Yeah. The true sense of harmony, in my opinion, is moving slow, being present, all the things I mentioned in that first point. And it's something that the discrimination, the experience of being discriminated against for something as trivial as your skin color, that's something that it strips away from you, because it creates this incorrect sense of urgency. You place your sense of survival on completely small things, really small things, and it robs your sense of being able to be present. I actually saw this in, excuse me, I need to go get the source of this so that everybody else can read it too. So this is someone that I saw from someone I'm following. They're reading a body of work right now that speaks on the kind of damage that apartheid does to you. And I unfortunately have now, I didn't take the screenshot, but it's a book about apartheid. I will definitely figure out how to share it and link it in the description of this video, because that's actually the thing that sparked my idea to share this information, and what I think is very necessary for a lot of people to activate, especially of the millennial age group. We're doing a lot of healing from that without realizing it. I think a lot of us, because of how our parents, not underestimated, but kind of like they had to shift it to the side and be like, well, that was messed up what happened, but anyway, time to move on, just keep going. They had to do that. We did that too, but we are privileged. The majority of us, I'm definitely privileged, thank God, enough to be able to take the time to look at this, all of this, and really understand the damage that all of that did to a group of people. That kind of, it's such a crime. We're going to get it corrected. The second point I have here is, hey, Pearl, I hope you're doing well too, darling. The second point I have here is connecting with ancestors with specific intention, increased prayer, working with elements, continuous inquiry into how my ancient ancestors would have solved modern problems. And then I bolded here, most important, an openness to connect with those in your bloodline who experienced the oppression, a willingness to feel the pain of that as if it were your own, because it is your own, and integrating that understanding that you don't exist. It's truly impossible. The way that a lot of us are living, it is impossible to continue on with life, with our lives, as if our parents didn't go through that shit. And it's ridiculous that a lot of them are behaving as if that never happened. And it makes sense also, because what else are you going to do if you're in survival mode? But these are like the energetic implications of the way that affected us, and the way that it will affect our children if we don't deal with it, the way it naturally will affect our children, because it's a lot of like, it's a very long time of damage to the psyche that we're like trying to process. And because of the length of time that not just us, but our entire family, lineages of people experience this kind of abuse, it's natural that we rely on them for assistance on how to make sense of the system, the results of all of that abuse. that links to another point, which I feel called to mention now. Part of how I healed. I went in and out of it. It's important, though, to note that I went in it and became a conspiracy theorist for a really long time. And I went down all of the rabbit holes that you go down that talk about the different kinds of species that are in control of the earth and what the system is about and why everything is happening, what the meaning of life is. You know what I mean? Deep inquiry into the center of that and getting deeply philosophical with that kind of shit, because I really do believe that conspiracy theorists are very naturally philosophical, in the sense of how the exploration philosophy is a practice of curiosity and constant inquiry, just an openness in general, the willingness to understand things from a different perspective. That's very necessary for us as a result of an apartheid system, because a lot of what we perceive is obviously as a result of that nonsense rubbish of our shame and of our psychological torture. I see all the results of the damage that it did to our psyche as individuals and as collectives, as families, as like a hill or a big solid mountain that really can only be crossed over if you ask the people who face the mountain. It's like what we're seeing actually is like some crystallized state with not much, with very vague detail. We have information, we have the internet, we have recordings, but we don't have experience. It's as if our ancestors, the people who I encourage everyone to connect to, connect to your ancestors as soon as you can. They are embedded inside the rocks and the mold of that structure. Why wouldn't you turn to them to ask how to tackle it down? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So to people who do not believe in ancestry and in working with ancestors, to each their own, but point blank, I'm going to say it in this video, I really don't get it. I think you're wrong. I really do. I think people who don't understand how to revere ancestors and who think that ancestral practice is demonic or anything like that, you're wrong. I think you're wrong, but that's what I think. And I highly recommend that you go through that avenue by consulting, or at the very least, praying with a candle and everything. But when you pray, make sure you are connecting specifically with your ancestors. So instead of saying, "Dear God," say, "Dear ancestors." And if you can, take it further and imagine them with you in the room, in your space. Even better. And this is something that I really hold with such a deep kind of envy. If you had a connection with your grandparents while they were alive and you really connected with them and you had conversations, you had some kind of relationship with them, you had exchanged love, bless. That is exactly the avenue you go through then when you do ancestral work. You talk to that grandparent or that elder that was in your life that you held dear to you when they were alive. Please do more into the rituals. That is definitely something that's helped me heal through this, is to really wash the shame away from doing like rituals and connecting with nature and all of life in a different way. Because really I think that's all traditional cultural practices are. You're just connecting with life in a different way. I would highly recommend, if you're intensively trying to go through this and you're intentionally trying to, okay, let me heal from apartheid, then I highly recommend you stay away from the relatives that present to be colonized, the ones who value materialism and specifically academic accolades. I believe that is a very thick, obvious, I don't know what the word is, consequence of apartheid abuse, is the deep, very dramatic, in my opinion, reverence of academia, from the sense of achieving the degree and the piece of paper, not from the sense of being knowledgeable of information. And you can tell the difference between people who do that. People who value academia for the information versus the doctor. I'm a doctor, the label of it. It also, the work of ancestors, doing ancestral work also allows you to restructure your desires and to understand, which I mentioned in a previous channeling, I think I labeled it. I'll link it in the description. They help you, that connection helps you readjust your desires so that you can be more grounded in what you want, so that you don't strive to get a Lamborghini just because you want a Lamborghini. Then you get the Lamborghini and you can't even maintain it, or you crash it, or it's just something, you can't even drive it, whatever. It's crazy how many stories you hear of that as well. Those kinds of lines where people of color, they really devoted themselves to material wealth. But when you take a broader look at their lives, it's like, why would you achieve that when so many other parts of your life are very messed up and need tending to? Why would you focus so intensely on money and the physical 3D accolades when clearly your spirit and your emotions are in danger? So many people like that in the world. It's shocking, actually. It's so grounding when you meet a rich person or abundant person who has so many things and stuff and things, but you can see in their eyes they are so sad. I believe that's a result of that psychological abuse. That's the basis of this video, and the detachment that this abuse, that apartheid abuse, did to our identity and our ways of being in the world. All the rituals and the cultures, our ancestors, the practices they did, I believe were important because they kept us connected to the flow of life and not separate from it. So that when we experience life's lows, so that when we experience a detachment of life or wanting to die, we are always connected to the flow and the understanding that, okay, at the very least, we know this is temporary. We can push through. Things will change. Everything will come together. Kuzolunga. Like, these are our natural, innate way to be able to, especially South Africans, to be able to be hopeful and to know that things are going to change. It's not always going to be the same. The ability to stay hopeful and like connected to our sense of happiness, our addiction to groove. It's our connection to spirit. And I think an innate knowing that that stuff is important. Apartheid really separated us from that and said, no, not only is it not important, we're going to make it illegal. How could you? Nonsense, man. Absolute nonsense. They are missing out. I'm assuming you're talking about the people who do not practice ancestral or believe in ancestral work. They definitely are, and it's a real shame. But I have also seen other people. So, okay, the reason this point is brought up, the connection with ancestors, is because I believe it's the safest, most grounded, like I said, way to connect with spirit. There are other ways to connect with spirit through various religious beliefs. Obviously, Christianity works for a lot of Black people, God bless. But it doesn't work for everybody. And a lot of the time, it works in a really perverted way, whereas somebody very, very Christian and religious is actually a very dirty, dirty person inside. Things like that also, I believe, is that discrepancy, the difference between praying to ancestors and praying to like a religion or a god that the white man brought. You know, I'm sure that everybody who tunes into my work also knows the conversation of how a lot of what we see is rooted in Western stuff, is rooted from a white man's mind. And we're trying to look at all of this stuff and say, oh, yeah, I identify. Yes, that's mine. Yes, no, none of this is ours. None of it. But you'll work with your own personal ways of how you understand that. The next point I have after that says surrender, and be aware of what you choose to surrender to. I'd mentioned that just now, in terms of like connecting to spirit through whatever avenue you choose, but through an avenue that you need to discern very properly on, because you're missing. This is a spirit work. It's spirit work, I believe, working through Apartheid, the psychological healing. It takes work of the spirit. And spirit right now, awareness, presence, all of that, our essence has always been valuable, but I think is more valuable now because of how whatever the beast is that abused us can feel it's losing its grip, so it's trying to hold on tighter. Yeah, if you get it, you get it. I like to be metaphorical with the ideas of discrimination and fear and abuse and the thing that's happening in Gaza right now, like all of that, I like to attribute it to the beast, the devil. Personifying it helps me understand. Well, turning it into a metaphor helps me understand it better. Otherwise, I really wouldn't understand what's going on. Then the next point I said is I reworked my discomfort with making impulsive decisions. And this is something that I know I've repeated over and over again. Now you know, it's because it's a trauma response. I really pivoted in my life to ignoring my inner impulses. Like, it feels like overnight because it happened very quickly. I could feel the inner impulse and the inner nudges, but I kept suppressing until really one day, and I'm pretty sure this is an astrological thing. I could attribute it to an astrological shift. One day I just woke up and thought, no, I can't do this anymore. I can't ignore that inner nudge. And I did it. It looked extremely impulsive, but it was not. And I've made a lot of impulsive decisions since then that have very deeply guided not just my experience, my universal experiences, but other people's as well, where they I mean, I get a lot of I don't know why I'm feeling this way, or I don't know why I'm reacting this way. I just am. And I know in the moment it's like, okay, yep, the universe, God is present. So opening up to that, if I believe that God is present all the time, if I believe I'm always living a godly, divine life, if I believe in this moment now, I am with God, God is with me, then nothing I could do is impulsive. Impulsive to me and my human ego that wants to control everything and that has a set plan, and that anything that deviates from that plan too quickly is labeled as impulsive. You know what I mean? It's all semantics. Reworking my discomfort with making impulsive decisions also has to do with the previous points, surrender. And the first point I opened with regarding moving slow, being present, and really like taking that really, really seriously. Even if you look weird to other people, even if while you're talking, you just stop talking or you just zone out in the moment. If that to you is the practice of being present, then yeah, that's what it is. But I do think also you'll know the experience you'll know the difference. Like I said, this is all subjective. This is according to me as a person. You have to consider that everybody is different. And yeah, we're all having very personal experiences with needing to work through all the really fucked up shit that was put upon us. It's a really fucked up system. The next point I have here says that I took psychedelics. I connected very intentionally with plant medicines. Again, to each their own. And I really, 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 really cannot not recommend this without, especially now, with the quickness of the way information travels. And there also feels to be this kind of like arrogance amongst the general collective because of how far we've come. It feels like the human being right now is very arrogant, and that's very dangerous. Please don't approach anything with a kind of arrogance. Please try to remain humble. Surrender requires that. So I assume that you're somebody who at least knows not to be too arrogant with things. But through working with plant medicine, I recommend.
So I want to take my plate of food out of the microwave.
Okay, let me finish this point. Working with plant medicines, when you do so, please try to do so as intentionally as possible. Because I think for me, that's the only way you're going to understand what you're doing. There are a lot of people who will just book a moment to have some shrooms with people they love just to vibe out. But these medicines and things, even weed, it's all very powerful. They all have their own like devas and otherworldly purposes as a result. Devas being the spiritual bodies that they are controlled by in the other realms. They connect to an energy, a sense of something, like flower essence, or like spices, and the way certain spices can, certain aromas can make you feel a certain kind of way. Each of these plant medicines, they have the same kind of properties. So when you engage with them, please do so very intentionally, preferably with a guide. If you're seeking to consult with someone, I can recommend someone to you. If you want to have a super chill conversation, you can totally reach out to me. I've stopped taking hero doses of psychedelics. I think that my process with honestly becoming a mother was psychedelic enough. The whole fucking thing. I haven't taken since then. It completely changed my world. That, I must say, is also something that helped me through the healing of the kind of apartheid damage, because it brought all of life into a closer view, made everything more intense, obviously more intentional. You start to think about the generational work, and healing from apartheid is generational work. So I wanted to mention the plant medicines I've been working with: cacao, psilocybin, marijuana, mushroom tinctures. Those are the medicines I've worked very, very closely with, especially marijuana up and down, and as like outside of the culture. You know what I mean? As a plant body, as a living girly that communicates and helps you with things and help you realize things. She's the babe. She's underrated. And again, highly recommend when you engage with this stuff, you do it so intentionally, do a recommendation, with the guidance, sorry. Or if you trust yourself enough, then make sure you're doing it with prayer, in prayer. The next point I have is I faced a hard lesson of the importance of being vulnerable in community and at the same time doing boundary setting. In brackets, making sure my cup is full first before upholding the standards of Ubuntu, which my relationship with how to instill Ubuntu in my personal life is very, it's very sticky because of how on the line I am with living a modern colonized life and with seeking to understand cultural life, and the way that those worlds meet and the way that they intertwine in each of our psyches and the things that we do and the way we communicate with each other as friends, as family. It's been very strange. It's very strange to see how we treat each other under certain conditions or under the name of certain things, and how that can discourage behavior of vulnerability. How a lot of us, honestly, in my opinion, as a result of the psychological abuse of the apartheid regime, we have been robbed with the basic sense of feeling safe, a sense of emotional security. As children, as the adults, the whole generation, we were completely stripped of our innate spiritual security, which will keep us secure in all areas of our lives. I believe if you are spiritually secure and you really focus on tending to that, your whole of life is going to be a secure experience because you are secure in your essence. They took the security that we had and the connection we had with our essence, which was our everything. It's entwined with everything we are, with our identity. It reminds me of the movie Spirited Away, where that witch, in order to, I guess, kind of keep people and keep their henchmen under control, she took their name and then gave them a new name. That's exactly what apartheid did to us. In taking our name, you take everything. You take who we are. You take how we identify, how we merge with life, how we merge with our own egos. We become enemies. We have become enemies to our own selves without even realizing it. In so many ways, it's so fucked up. But in the main way, unpacking that sense of vulnerability is also obviously like a tropical Scorpio lesson. So that's, again, like I've said, it's all subjective, all personal, but I have seen in my personal observation that this is a problem that a lot of us have. I'm sure that we all have our like friendships and connections and communities locked in. I beg you to consider consider how far you identify with the communities and relationships and things you're a part of. This has now become a channeling, as it is I'm offering this 2025 December. I feel strongly that next year, with the excitement of the horse year 2026, and honestly into the future, communities, relationships, connections are going to be very, very important for advancement. It's no longer going to be about how hard you work or even how long you work, but more about how smart you work. And part of working smart genuinely is knowing the right people, networking, and you yourself knowing how to be open and malleable enough to connect with the right people. That almost became a business chat. But yeah, this isn't a point I put down, but I would also like to identify that keeping those worlds separate is helpful for me as well, because keeping the worlds of like the material, the 3D, and my spirit separate, because a lot of the 3D material, like I said, is closely linked with the Western mind and the white man's mind. So in order to find my way through this world, I've had to maintain a clear distinction and keep myself and my comfort and who I am, my security and sense of vulnerability in the spiritual. And through the spirit, then I express vulnerability in my external. So like I said, yes, boundary setting, becoming very, not really exclusive, but like becoming very almost like calculative in a sense with where your energy goes, how it goes, and with why you're putting it there, you know? This also, I think, helps with tackling narcissistic abuse, as I think that the apartheid regime really it really transformed a lot of us and our families into narcissistic dark dens of like really shady abuse, fucked up projections, responses, and things. It's really terrible. It's really, really terrible, the results of what we've experienced. It's so unfortunate. And the work that it will take, I believe it takes so much more than just like going to therapy, which actually has to do with the last point that I said is very controversial as well, just to put it out there. But my personal experience, I avoided the Western world's involvement in my healing, specifically in my healing of apartheid, the regime and the abuse of that. I looked and I've tried to sit a lot. I mean, we've obviously learned enough in school, but I think as people of color, it's our responsibility to go beyond that and to take careful stock of how it has affected us in our personal everyday lives. And as mentioned in the Willie Lynch video, how it's affected us internally, how it's caused a split within us, of having an inner slave master and an inner slave. The way that you talk to yourself, the way that you forgive yourself through mistakes, the way that you hold yourself through grief, shit like that. Apartheid and the way it's fucked us up has trickled down into even that. Imagine the way we process grief. Terrible stuff. So, that also has to do with how I kept those worlds separate. With everything to do with my healing, I did actually try going to therapy, and I always felt deeply like, not like in my center, I just felt like that is absolutely not what's going to help me through the shit that I need to process. And I always left a session feeling that way. There was a moment very briefly when I was still a university student in which I did receive help from a brilliant therapist named Alex. I don't remember what his surname is, but I wanted to shout him out because I've never had an experience with a therapist before where I felt like, wow, you really are a therapist. You really are made for this. And he helped me while I was going through it. So maybe that's important. But for the sessions where I was trying to unpack my childhood and stuff, it just felt like, this is not going to help me with the problem. In all honesty, everything that I've just mentioned is what helped me. And most importantly, praying and being willing to, as I pray, be totally honest about what I'm praying about. Be totally vulnerable in that moment of prayer. With everything, with every sensation that I feel through, including moments where I feel angry at the journey, angry at the fact that I am a result of a very fucked up time in history. that I came out of that like my parents and people I love had to experience that. Let it all out at your altar. Create an altar. I haven't put this, but in your experience with connecting with ancestors and that whole journey, you have to create an altar. I do think that it will be a very natural thing that happens, even if you get a separate like consultation from Isangoma and they don't even address the fact that you need to build an altar. It will very naturally come that you have to have one, a dedicated space in your house for where you connect to spirit, to the other realms, to even yourself. You need that space. I think all of us really, really need that space in order to tend to the parts that were very viscerally damaged through the apartheid regime. We are so fucked because of that shit. And I think that it's really such a fallacy on all of our parts, all the black people who who gave in, or who followed maybe too quickly, in my opinion, the rhetoric of forgiveness, Rainbow Nation. That was a little bit invalidating. And yeah, separate conversation. We have a lot of anger and sadness to face within us as a result of this. I hope this was helpful in coping with that. That is also another thing that I think has to be emphasized. We hold a lot of pain as a result. So much pain. And honestly, if you're watching this, then the chances are that you identify with the experience of recognizing that pain in your generational elders and seeing how that pain has been unaddressed in the way that they behave, in the way that they are, seeing in their eyes how afraid they are to face that within themselves. It hurts. The shame, the amount of shame that's built up within us for generations, it's also painful, but it's worth it in the end. I'm not at the end, just by the way, but I honestly believe that I've been in this journey long enough to know that it reaps rewards that are far-reaching, far beyond this lifetime that you live for yourself, far beyond many few lifetimes. This is healing work that we are very deeply responsible for because we're in it. We're the chosen ones, essentially. So I really hope that, I hope we get to it. I hope we get to looking at our lives differently and at ourselves and really understanding how to live more truthful lives. This was also a very, very broad conversation. I don't think that the crux of it could be squeezed into about 40 odd minutes. And again, entirely subjective. This conversation is obviously better had with people who have experienced like the actual apartheid regime, who witnessed it, who witnessed themselves having to process it or are still processing it. You may even get knowledge from people who have not processed it at all. There's gems and information everywhere. I'm not the main source of it, and I wouldn't recommend that I be the main source of it. Please look into all the recommendations that I put in the description of this video. I'll go about building that. And please have conversations with as many people as possible. And connect. Very important for the times we're in. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next live stream.